You know, the biggest corporate collapses in history? They weren't accidents. Behind all the splashy headlines and the lost fortunes, there lies a hidden pattern, a blueprint for disaster, followed with chilling precision time and time again. Think about it. Enron, back in 2001, FTX, just a couple years ago. These weren't isolated incidents or some kind of freak accidents of the market. No, they were echoes, the same fundamental crime, just committed with different tools, separated only by time. And the cost, it is staggering. If you add up the shareholder value, the employee savings, the public trust that just vaporized by these titans and others like them, the number soars past $1 trillion. It's a figure so huge it's almost hard to wrap your head around, but behind it is real ruin for millions of people. And this brings us to the central burning question. This isn't just bad luck or a few bad apples. It's a playbook, a predictable, repeatable sequence of events that leads to total destruction. So what is this common playbook for corporate collapse? Well, to answer that, we're going to follow an investigative framework. We're going to dissect the anatomy of the lie, explore the pressure that fuels it, the opportunities that allow it, and the culture that protects it. And by the end, you won't just see how these giants fell. You'll understand why their falls were tragically inevitable. So, to connect these collapses across different decades and industries, we need an investigator's toolkit. We need a way to understand the anatomy of these sophisticated, company-killing crimes. And lucky for us, that tool exists. It's called the fraud triangle. See, criminologists discovered that nearly every major corporate fraud is built on three pillars: intense pressure to perform, a clear opportunity to commit the fraud, and the ability to rationalize the behavior. When these three things come together, disaster is almost guaranteed. So let's start our investigation with the first side of that triangle, pressure. You can think of this as the catalyst. It's the immense, often totally unrealistic demand for results that pushes entire companies right to the breaking point. This quote from a WorldCom officer, man, it just says it all. The pressure from their CEO, Bernie Ebbers, was relentless. It was laser-focused on one single thing: hitting Wall Street's growth targets no matter what it took. This pressure wasn't just a goal, it was literally the entire culture. And this right here shows the impossible situation they created for themselves. Publicly, the CEO was promising Wall Street this incredible, sustained double-digit growth. But internally, the reality was a collapsing market. The business simply could not deliver. And that gap, that chasm between the promise and reality, well, it created a void that could only be filled with one thing: fraud. Okay, so let's move to the second side of the triangle. Because pressure alone doesn't cause a catastrophe. There has to be an opportunity, a weakness in the system, a blind spot in oversight, for all that pressure to ignite into full-blown fraud. And here it is. You could call this the rap sheet. Just look at the gimmicks. Capitalizing everyday expenses at WorldCom, literally inventing 1.9 billion euros in assets at Wirecard. The specific weapon changes, but the opportunity is always the same: exploiting complex accounting rules, weak internal controls, and auditors who are just not asking the tough questions. Let's just zoom in on Lehman Brothers for a second. Their weapon of choice was this clever accounting trick called Repo 105. Now, it was a complex move, but it was designed to do one very simple thing: make the company look way healthier than it actually was by temporarily hiding massive amounts of debt right at the end of every single quarter. And the scale was just breathtaking. They were shuffling $50 billion of assets off their books just to quietly buy them back a few days later. This wasn't a rounding error. This was a deception of historic proportions, and it was engineered to fool the entire market. And right here, this is the smoking gun. They knew exactly what they were doing. An internal email described this $50 billion scheme as, and I quote, basically window dressing. Another executive called it another drug we're on. So no, this wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, calculated deception. But the opportunity at FTX was somehow even more blatant. The company's new CEO actually called it a complete failure of corporate controls. Customer money went into bank accounts controlled by Sam Bankman-Fried's private hedge fund. That fund was then given an unlimited line of credit to use customer funds for risky bets and personal luxuries. There were no checks, no balances, zero oversight. It was a wide open door for fraud on a massive scale. So even with all that pressure and a golden opportunity, you still need that third element, the human factor, the rationalization. This is what creates a culture of complicity, where people either actively join in on the lie or they're just too afraid to speak up. At Theranos, the blood testing company that was a massive fraud, founder Elizabeth Holmes created this incredibly toxic culture of fear. Employees who dared to question the technology or defy her faced serious retribution. This hostile environment totally silenced anyone who knew the truth, and it allowed the fraud to go on for years. At Enron, complicity was like a slow rot that spread over more than a decade. As early as 1987, the board knew about fraud but kept the people responsible because, get this, they were making too much money. By the end, their own auditor, Arthur Andersen, was actively shredding evidence. This wasn't one bad decision. It was a long, sustained pattern of just looking the other way. And this complicity extends to these so-called watchdogs, the people paid to protect all of us. The very auditors and regulators who were supposed to prevent these disasters were often the key enablers. Arthur Andersen completely missed a $7 billion fraud at WorldCom. Ernst & Young gave a clean bill of health to Wirecard for a decade. And Germany's regulator BaFin investigated the journalists who were exposing the Wirecard fraud instead of the company itself. It's a systemic failure, right, across the board. So after examining the pressure, the opportunity, and the culture of complicity, we can now deliver the final verdict. The pattern is undeniable. This isn't just random chance. It's a formula. Intense pressure plus clear opportunity plus a culture of complicity equals collapse. When these factors combine, a catastrophic failure isn't just possible, it's inevitable. It becomes a matter of when, not if. A former Enron prosecutor said this after the Lehman Brothers collapse, and it just perfectly captures the whole tragedy. The names change, the industries change, but the core mechanics of the fraud, they stay identical. It's the same mistakes, the same willful blindness, playing out over and over again. So, we've laid out the playbook for corporate self-destruction piece by devastating piece. The warning signs are clear for anyone who's willing to look. And that leaves us with one final, chilling question to think about. Which of today's corporate titans is hiding these same secrets right now in plain sight?